Hello, my name is Andrea Robertson. My teacher name is Ms. Robertson. I'm currently a teaching fellow at a local independent school here in Victoria, BC, British Columbia. I've been an educator for about 13 or so years, and I have two, if you don't mind me.
Absolutely.
I have two teachers that I think of very fondly. Mr. Cranenberg, who was my grade 9 social studies teacher, who then later became my mentor and supervisor during my practicum years. And then I have Mr. Cragen, who I think about quite often because I only had him for 1 year and he was my grade 10 social studies teacher, but he was actually a science teacher. And I find as more I think about him, the more his time teaching me reflects what my career has turned out to be.
Hello, teachers from around the world, and welcome to the Legendary Educator podcast, the podcast for teachers for continuing professional development, where we discuss everything related to education. I'm your host, Mr. Ramos. And hey, happy Teacher Appreciation Week. I know it was last week, but as I'm recording this episode, it is actually this week. So, funny how these things work with podcasts. Anyway, if you haven't heard this yet, hopefully you can hear it from me. Teachers, thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your long hours. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your passion in the classroom. Thank you for your passion for inspiring your students. And thank you for being a teacher. I'm sure your students appreciate it. And if they don't yet, they will soon. One of the great things about being a teacher is the flexibility to travel and teach abroad. Yep. You can drop everything and decide to go teach in a foreign country for a couple of years, whether or not you actually have any teaching experience. But is it worth it? If you've been thinking about traveling and teaching abroad, well then this episode is for you. My guest this week is Ms. Andrea Robertson, an old friend of mine who currently teaches in Canada, but has done her time teaching in several countries, and that's what we discuss today. We talk about her positive and negative experiences about teaching abroad, and she gives her opinion on whether or not it's a good idea to leave home and go into the unknown. We also talk about living through a revolution. Yes, a real-life political upheaval in one of the countries she was living in at the time. Needless to say, this is going to be a very exciting episode. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of the extremely important episodes coming up in the next several weeks as we wind down this first season of the Legendary Educator. And make sure you go to the website legendaryeducator.com to subscribe to the mailing list, because I'm getting ready to make some exciting announcements. It was a blast from the past talking with this legendary educator. Ms. Robertson, welcome. Thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast episode. Being a teacher is tough. Sure, it's one of the most rewarding jobs you could possibly have, but more often than not, you're overworked, underpaid, not to mention the stress and pressure coming at you from every direction. From keeping your students on track, satisfying the administration with your performance, and of course parents telling you that you need to pay more attention to their kid, because you don't have 20 other kids in your class. Sometimes you just need to turn it all off and talk to someone, don't you? Well, let me introduce you to BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you, more scheduling flexibility, and at a more affordable price. Use the link betterhelp.com/legendaryeducator to get 10% off your first month of therapy. That's betterhelp.com/legendaryeducator. Check out BetterHelp today. You deserve it. met all the way back in 2011, I think, when you were a teacher teaching abroad in Egypt. And that was an interesting time for you. Egypt back in 2011. And we're going to talk about this later on. But first, I want to peek at your professional resume. How many years did you teach abroad and in how many countries?
I taught abroad for about 3.5 to 4 years. I started in Korea, and then I went to Egypt for 2 years. And then I ended my abroad years teaching in China for a year.
What was your motivation for, leaving home?
Well, that's a great question. It had a lot to do. Well, there's two reasons. One, I have family members who grew up in international schools, so I knew about this concept of Canadian schools abroad, and I thought that was really cool. And it kind of spoke to my need and want to travel. I had traveled before, then I went back to school, and so it just kind of came my raison d'être. The reason to become a teacher was to have this opportunity to bring life and play together, right?
Okay,
work and play together.
Okay,
yeah. But the big reason why I ended up doing it, as opposed to saying I was going to do it, but actually genuinely going out and trying, was I graduated with my B.Ed and my B.A. in a time when there were no jobs for teachers, particularly in British Columbia. So if I wanted to teach, I was looking at 5 to 10 years of sitting on the TOC list. In BC, we call it TOC, it's the teacher on call list. Or I could go overseas and try my hand at getting some experience. So I ended up in Korea first. My goal was always to be in the Middle East, but the Middle East wanted at least 2 years experience before they would even look at your resume. And I was fresh out of university and there was no opportunity. So I went to Asia and I ended up in a independent school there. It wasn't affiliated with any particular country. But it was not a hog one. It was a classic school, but it was a for-profit private institution for very young children. And I'm a senior school teacher. So I was a little bit a fish out of water, but what an opportunity. So that's why I ended up overseas, was so that I could actually teach. I could get in the classroom and start honing my craft right away.
Okay, let's talk about all the positive things. What were your positive experiences? What were the benefits of living abroad, teaching abroad?
There are many positives about teaching and living abroad. The one is the adventure. If you are an adventurous person, you should be doing this. If you're not an adventurous person, you should be doing this. It will actually push you. I mean, some people, they think they're adventurous. They get off that plane and they go, no, thanks. Other people think, I'm not adventurous, but this is a pretty sweet setup that I have here. And I think maybe I can push myself out. And then they end up staying out for years. I don't think you know until you know. It gave me teaching experience immediately. Often the teaching experience wasn't easy. Often it was very difficult. And you learn to be flexible when you're teaching overseas. You think you might be going into a system that you've been promised a certain position, and then you arrive and they say, actually, the teacher who just got off the plane that was going to teach junior kindergarten can't do junior kindergarten because she's freaking out. And hey, would you mind possibly stepping in and taking on this role, even though you're a senior school social studies teacher?
Right.
Sure. The living, you get in the right schools, you can make good money. Often your flights are covered to and from. You get often paid a fairly decent wage, tax-free if you do your homework and you take a look and make sure you cover all your basics before you leave. Medical, there's opportunities to save. It allowed me to put a substantial amount of money down on my student loans by living overseas. I could send over 70% of my income back home to be able to pay down my debt. So it worked in many ways. And it also exposed me to different ways of learning, different people around my nation, different people around the country, in different countries. And being an outsider in another country is very humbling and very exciting. And you learn the art of teaching really quickly. You have to figure out that the ways in which you think are the right ways to do it, and your systems and your culture aren't necessarily the culture there. And you learn, it humbles you very quickly, especially if you allow it to. That's just some of the positives. There are many, many positives.
Okay, so besides education and the teaching aspect of it, day-to-day life, good things, memorable moments, things like that?
Well, as you are well aware, your sister and I are best friends. I mean, I met your sister my second day of being in Egypt,
Mm.
and we connected immediately. And to this day, even though I haven't seen her in,
You were roommates, weren't you, once upon a time?
we lived together for a
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
traveled
Or
to and
housemates, I guess.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah, we traveled to and from our job from Mahdi in Cairo to 6th of October City, which was not an easy drive to and from every day. You develop relationships. I am still very much in touch with a handful of people, particularly in my years in Egypt. Less so with my Korea experience, more so with my Egypt experience and with my China experience. As you grow, so do your friendships, I think. Oh, life was good. I mean, this is where being adventurous is important. When you live abroad, it can be very lonely at times. You go through those phases, right? Where it's like the honeymoon phase, and then
Yeah, the
like
homesickness.
there's like a scientific process, right? Then you get homesickness, and then you get angry, and nothing is like at home. And so if you're not adventurous, or if you're not establishing good relationships with the people around you, you can get sucked into a vortex that can make the experience difficult. But if you're able to poke your head up above it and say, yeah, okay, I'm having a tough day today, or living here is difficult. And, living in Egypt in 2011 was not.
No, we'll get to that in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But the people are amazing and the opportunities are there. You'll never get opportunities at home like you will get overseas.
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know if this is particular to Egypt or not. I don't think it is actually, but there were a number of times where I'd be somewhere doing something, talking to somebody. Now, and for example, there was a going away party. So a colleague of mine had been there for 17 years. Her friends had been there for 17 years. She worked for the World Health Organization. Her husband worked for Reuters. They were moving. So they threw a party. Well, they're in these two major organizations. I'm at this party. Meanwhile, I'm sitting beside lawyers from the WHO, and I'm sitting with major journalists, and I'm thinking, how is a small town girl
How did I get here?
sitting and having these conversations with these really interesting, cool people? If I had continued to live in Vernon, British Columbia, which I love as my hometown, I wouldn't have had these experiences. By virtue of being overseas and being part of an expat community, it enabled me to rub shoulders with people I would never have had that opportunity to do. And by doing so, it starts broadening your worldview. You start seeing things differently. It's not about hoity-toityness and look who I'm walking with, but rather talking with these people, you start to have a different understanding of how the world works. You start seeing how beautiful it is to be coming from a small town, but how isolated it is. And how the world is bigger and the problems are larger and the beauty is grander and the human identity is so much more rich than you ever realized, right? That's what I love about living overseas.
Well said. That was really good.
I have my moments.
Let's maximize on these moments. Any other positives, or do you want to go into the negatives?
I'll probably think of more positives as we go along, to be honest with you.
Okay. Summer is right around the corner, and that means you finally get some time off. Or that could also mean that you can have an opportunity to make some side income by doing something that you probably already do on a daily basis. Nowadays provides online courses developed by experts to help learners build the confidence and skills they need to start a new, fulfilling career or side hustle. Their courses have opened the doors for more than 6,000 learners seeking highly flexible work and extra income. What makes them unique is that their top graduates are offered guaranteed work with partner companies. For their two existing courses, Becoming a Proofreader and Becoming an Editor, they partnered with Proofed, a proofreading and editing services business. All Know-A-Day courses are certified as continuing professional development. This means that any Know-A-Days graduate will have an internationally recognized certification that meets the requirements of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. If you'd like to try their courses commitment-free, they offer a detailed free trial so that learners can see exactly how the courses will benefit them. Additionally, a full refund is offered within 2 weeks from purchase for any Know-A-Days course that doesn't meet a learner's expectations. You can find the link in the show notes or at legendaryeducator.com/resources. Check out Know-A-Days today and be on your way to making extra income in a matter of weeks. As I mentioned at the beginning, living in Egypt in 2011 was a very interesting time for everybody living in Egypt in 2011. Can you tell us why?
There was a revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And as a social studies teacher, it was
mind-blowing, right?
It was truly and honestly mind-blowing in amongst the chaos. And
exactly.
I think what's really important to take away from that experience is that everybody had a different experience with the revolution.
Yes.
Every single one of us. There were 3 of us living in my building. 2 of them were not in my building during a particular time, and I had a very different experience than the others. It was beautiful, it was exciting, and it was heart-wrenching. And it shifted Egypt completely and my experience of being in Egypt. I wouldn't take it away. In fact, I stayed another year. I started, the school year started at September 2010.
I remember I was surprised that you came back.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because I knew how scary it was for you. I mean, again, as a social studies teacher, I was a social studies teacher. I mean, yes, it had its, scary moments, but I mean, looking back, it's like we were right in the middle of a historical event.
We are watching history unfold.
Exactly.
And as history teachers from a democracy who've always kind of, we drank the Kool-Aid, democracy is the one and only system. And once it's exposed and people see what it is, it'll automatically shift your worldview, and you'll be like, how did we never do this before? And I think that was the most heartbreaking part about living in Egypt, was watching a nation figure out what democracy was.
Right. Yeah.
And watching a nation not being really properly advised about how to get to that. And watching a nation with, all this history, you can't really fault it. The fact that it didn't end up the way we wanted at the end, as somebody who lives outside of it now.
Right. Yes, exactly.
I can look at it and go, okay, am I surprised? But when I was in it, I was upset. I was really upset that the opportunities were squandered, that people were taking advantage of other people, that the miscommunication, the misinformation, and watching this opportunity. Yeah, but also watching and realizing that the system that I had been told was the only system, and then watching it not work, and then coming back to my democracy and with new eyes and realizing just how broken it can be, and how much we take advantage of how good we have it here, especially in Canada, and people complaining about the most simplest of things. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not going to lie to you. That experience changed me forever. I am not remotely the same person as I was when I started in Egypt. It shifted my life completely, and it's taken me a while to rectify that.
So you are actually looking at this from a positive light, because I was actually going to start sort of talking about the negative aspects of living abroad or teaching abroad, but again, I mean, it's been 10 years, it's been 20 years now, so we can say that now, right? At the time, it was a scary event for you. I know that you went through.
Yeah, well, we lived across the street from the prison.
Yes,
that eventually housed Mubarak, and that prison was a prison that kind of was. It was a tough prison. There were some things going on and some actions that were made, and it impacted the neighbors.
So let me put things into perspective. I mean, I was living in a building. You were living a couple of buildings down, and this street was right in front of one of the biggest prisons in Egypt, where all the political sort of prisoners go to, and is where the former president of Egypt was.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. I mean, that's a remarkable thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah.
Again, we can say that now, right? There was also the gunfire and the,
building attacks.
and the machine guns and the building attacks, and not knowing who's whom and all that. Yes, I remember all that. But
curfew.
The curfew. Oh my gosh. Yes, we had to go home like 6, 7 o'clock. I remember that. That.
You're walking with your purse or your bag on the front.
Yes.
Just in case the car drove by and pulled it and you didn't get dragged. Desperation. Things like revolutions are exciting, but it creates levels of desperation, and it becomes, a different world.
So what are some, because we are a balanced and we are a fair show, what are some of the negative aspects of living abroad In general, like any country, not specifically Egypt during a revolution, but but any country.
Well, they tend to be the same.
Hmm.
So if you are a teacher or an individual that has graduated from school and is looking to, not quite sure what they're going to do, and so you want to go teach ESL, for example, going overseas to teach in some capacity leaves you open to different people in different organizations. Pretty much all of the organizations, unless you end up working for a public school or a not-for-profit international school, they are for-profit institutions.
Right.
Which means that you sign a contract, they tell you it's one thing, you get there, it's another. There's no protection, there's no unions, it's based on trust. It's a bit of, because there are no unions and because there's no overarching body, you don't have any guarantee that the people that you're working for are trustful. You don't necessarily get you don't know if the people that are put in positions of power that are from your country are also the best people for the job. So you are exposed and you're trapped. If you're a woman, it's a different experience than if you're a man. Depending on which country you go to, sometimes you're required to give your passport up. You can't leave if you don't have your passport. There's just, sometimes you're cheated. Sometimes you're not given what you're promised. You have no third party to ensure that you are protected, that you're safe, and that the contract that you signed is actually going to be upheld.
Right.
Right. So in those circumstances, I think there's little bits, negative things we can talk about. But I think the overarching piece is you want to make sure that wherever you end up is as trustworthy as possible, and that there is some sort of third-party organization that holds them accountable. So an accredited school, for example, like a school that's accredited by another country. So in Canada, we have these international schools. They're like BC schools or Manitoba schools or Ontario schools. All those schools, they are for-profit institutions,
right?
But they must be accredited every year by a third party from those governments to come, from the Ministry of Education. They come and ensure that the teachers are all doing what they're doing. The unit plans are done. They're all upheld, because at the end of the day, these kids graduate with the dogwood diploma that you and I graduated with from our respective high schools here in Canada. There's an accountability that happens there. That being said, I opened a BC school in China. So I arrived in China. It was a brand new school we're opening, so it was only be 30 kids. I arrived with a brand new, fresh out of university teacher. We landed in China after a very long and difficult journey to get there, and there was no principal. And I was like, well, what do you mean there's no principal? They're like, well, we were told by our onshore rep that we don't need a principal to open this school. And I was like, well, of course you do. It's a British Columbia certified school, or will be a British Columbia certified school. You are required to not only have BC certified teachers, but you're required to have administrators who are overseeing this, who work with your onshore rep. But while we were flying and traveling to China, the government of BC fired the onshore rep because they had found out that she had set up a bunch of falsehoods. So, you land, and sometimes a job isn't what you think it's going to be. I land, and I had a whole 2.5 years of experience under my belt, and I became the principal of the school.
Nice.
Full time. And it was an experience. And having that has actually propelled my future career now that I'm back onshore, right?
What about some of like the, sort of day-to-day?
Yeah, it can be very difficult. So in Egypt, I found not knowing the language wasn't an issue, but being a woman was interesting. I learned a lot about, I grew up being an independent, strong woman, didn't need anybody for anything. And then you go to a nation like Egypt that has a very different perspective on gender roles and rights and responsibilities. And I realized that I couldn't transfer my Canadian ideals to Egypt and just assume A, they were going to be respected, and B, that it was culturally appropriate.
Right.
I had to adjust. I mean, it didn't mean I became subservient. It meant that I had to navigate.
Yes.
In a way that I still felt that I was keeping my identity, making sure that I was keeping myself safe, being a single woman over there, but also being respectful. And I think because I was respectful to my neighbors, they took incredible care of me. Well, especially during the revolution. And throughout the time, you did, and your sister did, right? And your family did, and all sorts of people. So, I mean, in China, it was language. There's a culture piece there. We were the very first international school being opened in this province, so we were new to them. The idea that obviously I didn't speak Chinese or Mandarin, part of my language. I didn't speak Mandarin. My colleague didn't speak Mandarin. And there's a piece there where nobody would pick us up in a cab. Egypt, you got money, we'll take you anywhere. We will figure it out. China, it was about saving face. They knew I couldn't speak their language. They couldn't speak my language. So they would just drive past me. I could never get a cab anywhere.
Wow.
I couldn't speak Mandarin. Or
That's
I
so
looked like I
interesting.
couldn't speak Mandarin.
Right. Yeah. That's so interesting. You know, it's no secret that teachers spend on classroom supplies out of their own pockets. Whiteboard markers, crayons, coloring pencils, sometimes even furniture for their classrooms. So it's only logical that teachers would want the best deals for their school supplies. I found this website that sells literally everything a teacher would need to fill their classrooms, for all grade levels. Discount School Supply offers the best variety of school supplies, arts and craft supplies, teaching resources, educational-based toys and games, and learning tools for children, parents, and teachers. With a collection of thousands of arts and crafts materials, education toys, and dramatic play toys, the Discount School Supply website and catalog are sure to have something for infants and toddlers, as well as children in daycares, kindergarten, or preschool. Teachers and parents say the company offers great quality at a great price. Other benefits include free shipping on stock orders over $99, same-day shipping, 110% lowest price guarantee, plus web-only promotions. And they even have a clearance page for even more savings. Discount School Supply is America's one-stop shop for everything a teacher would ever need throughout the year. Check it out to see if you qualify for free shipping. Please use the affiliate link to support the channel. You can find it in the show notes or at legendaryeducator.com/resources. Discount School Supply, always low prices, always 110% guaranteed. Weighing all the negatives and the positives, is it worth it?
Yeah, hands down. And I can speak from my own experience. Okay, if you want to be a teacher that wants to just do the classic, get in the classroom, stay at the same school for your entire career, no. Because the public system, particularly in British Columbia, doesn't necessarily understand the value of an international teacher. And they have system, they have a union and there's all these steps. So the time away from putting in your union hours will delay your eventual continuing contract in your province. But if you're okay and you're willing to say, okay, I'll forego the safety and the comfort and the golden handcuffs of a union and a public pension to go and learn and be and do teaching from the get-go. Yes, 100 times yes. As an independent school teacher, it is the reason why I'm in my fellowship at the school that I'm at right now, right? It is because I have a breadth of experience. I have taught kindergarten, I've taught grade 1, I've taught grade 2, I've taught grade 4, I've taught science, I've taught math, I've taught socials, I've taught French. I teach economics. That's actually what I teach now. Political science, I teach philosophy. Like I've taught everything, English, all of it, all grades. And because of that, I may not have the safety of a government pension and a union, but I have a resume that is clear that I am capable of doing anything. I am capable of stepping in when others step out, that I can grow with an institution and grow individually as a teacher, which means I don't get stagnant in my teaching practice.
Yes.
And as I work in these independent schools, they tend to be more international. So I have not a perfect amount, but I have some understanding that different cultures have different approaches to learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, besides the professional aspect of it, there is the experience and the relationships and the socialization outside of your own sort of cultural bubble, and the expansion of your mentality and the expansion of your horizons and so forth and so forth, right?
Well, that's exactly it. And because I have taught in multiple different schools and in different countries, I'm someone who likes systems. I'm a systems thinker. I just a couple years ago completed my master's in leadership, and I approach things with different ideas because I have been exposed to them. I haven't been at the same school for 20 plus years, and so I'm not necessarily only understanding one way of doing things.
Yes.
So I can come in and say, have you thought about X, Y, or Z? And in addition to working overseas, is you are exposed not just to different leadership styles and different ideologies and different cultures, but as an educator, you're exposed to different systems of education. So I worked at a Manitoba school in Egypt, teaching Manitoba curriculum, but I became exposed to this concept of IB, International Baccalaureate.
Right.
And then when I came back to Canada, and then so I knew that at the end of the day, I was looking for an IB school. And I came and worked in Canada and Victoria at an IB school, spent years teaching in the IB program, which has just honed my ability to teach even more because I was exposed to it. So many public school teachers don't even know what an IB school is.
Exactly.
For good or for bad, they just don't.
Right.
At the end of the day, outweighs the negatives.
Okay.
100%. Adventure, excitement, friendships, relationships, growing as an academic, growing as a teacher, an educator, like especially in the 21st century, all we talk about in the literature is about 21st century education. None of us know what that looks like.
Because we don't, it hasn't been established yet.
Right? We use 20th century models. We use 17th
We're
century
creating it now.
systems. Yeah. And so we're creating it now. And the best way to create it is a globalized world where you need globalized teachers.
Well said.
Thanks.
Nice. Okay, last question. What is the most frustrating thing of being a teacher? A teacher, not international teacher, just a teacher.
That's a great question. I don't know. I'll say one, and I'll only talk about one. I'd say one of the most frustrating things about being a teacher is teachers they have a little bit of ADHD. They have many balls in the air. They are perfectionists. They're people pleasers. They're overachievers. But amongst that, they're incredibly, incredibly creative. And to be creative and all these other things I mentioned about what it makes a teacher requires time. And more often than not, there's just not enough time to do the job the way you want to do it.
Right. Yes.
Right. In many classrooms, there is no teaching. It's just classroom management, which means that it's really difficult because you don't feel like you're having any success. And teaching is this long-term success. So I used to paint houses. And the nice thing about painting houses was it was instant gratification. Paint the wall, you paint the room, done. Oh,
looks nice. Yeah.
Looks good, right? Teaching, you don't necessarily see the results until 3 years later and your student phones you and says, hey, guess what? I'm working for the Bank of Canada. And you're like, what? That's amazing. That makes my heart so happy. It wasn't about me. It was about you growing and being and doing, right? That's the frustration because we try so hard to be perfectionists and do the job so very well. And you don't always feel like you have the time to do that, to have that success. So you see a lot of, like, you wonder then, are you impacting? Are you changing? Are you impacting?
Hello?
Anybody else there?
Yeah.
I think that's one I'm currently thinking about as a frustration of being a teacher.
Again, that is an awesome answer.
Thanks, Ramos.
I thank you, Andrea, and all the best to you. And I hope we chat again on the Legendary Educator.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Good luck to it all. I'm loving it already. And my love to your family.
Okay. Thank you so much. One of the great things about being a teacher is the flexibility to teach abroad and travel the world, see new cultures, and meet new people. Schools from all over the world are always looking for native English speakers to teach their students, sometimes whether or not you're actually trained or have any teaching experience. What you will need, however, is a TEFL certification, or Teaching English as a Foreign Language. This is your ticket to working at thousands of schools all over the world. in Asia, Middle East, South America, and Europe. The TEFL Institute is an internationally recognized and leading TEFL course provider. They offer a range of accredited TEFL courses to students worldwide to prepare them to teach English anywhere in the world. With over 30 years of teaching experience and expertise in EFL training, their TEFL courses are recognized and trusted by employers globally. They are motivated by their passion for travel, teaching, and building lasting relationships with their students. And they're here for you every step of your TEFL journey. By being TEFL certified, you can teach overseas and online, even if you don't have a teaching background. With the TEFL Institute, become TEFL certified in a matter of weeks. To support the channel, use the link available in the show notes, or browse this and other great resources at legendaryeducator.com/resources. Check out the TEFL Institute today and explore the next chapter of your career, and get up to 42% off the price of your course. Let me know what you thought about today's episode by leaving your comments, questions, or complaints in the Legendary Educator Facebook group. And if you have any questions about living or teaching abroad, please let me know because I could probably help you out. You'll find the link in the show notes, or you can find it by searching for Legendary Educator FB group on Facebook. You can follow me on Instagram at Legendary Educator, and you'll want to get on the mailing list by going to legendaryeducator.com because I'm cooking up some really exciting things for you. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this episode, because that does something with the algorithms, which actually helps out a lot. Next week, another legendary episode with a different legendary educator. Class is dismissed.